Hello, friends. Welcome to a rather impromptu edition of Kirk Your Enthusiasm by Pod Maverick. I'm Kirk Henderson, and today I am joined by Mavs fan, and sort of budding media mogul, Jason Gallagher. How you doing, buddy?
Good. What's up? How are you?
I'm good. And so, part of the reason I think people find podcasts appealing is what you're actually doing is just having you're taking a conversation you might have with someone, recording it, and throwing it on the internet. And so you and I have been talking about the Luka Doncic of it all for a couple of weeks now. And really kind of the whole season going back into last year when Tim Bontemps did his final straw poll. I had him on the show here. He and I had a little bit of a discussion, which nobody found satisfactory in hindsight. That's the best kind of show. And so we're looking at the Dallas Mavericks here. There are 16-8. Luka Doncic missed a significant number of games for reasons. We will say they ascribed it to a wrist injury. Tim McMahon said it was a wrist injury and also he used it to get into shape. So whatever, he was out. The Mavericks won 5 games without him, and the one game they lost, Kyrie missed a free throw, and the Mavericks lost their mind. The Mavericks have lost 8 games by a total of 39 points. Keep in mind the Lakers lost a game to the Miami Heat by 41 points. Yeah. And so we're here and we're just sort of looking ahead, and there's the Luka Doncic chatter for a variety of reasons is starting to rise. And I wanted to give Jason an opportunity to talk about some things that he's been tweeting about like a great Maverick soldier that he is. So what's going on?
Not much. Thanks for having me. It feels good to be in a public platform where it isn't like 11:30 at night and I'm a couple glasses of wine.
No, you with wine. Like I love the fact that you did you produced a podcast with LeBron and JJ involving wine, because I have the feeling you were like, well, this is what I do, so why don't you guys do this as well?
No, I mean my budget for wine is much lower. I get mine at a beautiful place called Walgreens.
No, it's a box. It's cool.
Yeah. It's fun. It's fun to be here. I appreciate you asking me to come on and talk about this, because I talked about it a little bit with our friend Andrew Schlecht with the Down to Dunk podcast, and he actually prompted with me. He hadn't seen my tweets yet, but he had asked, given the way that Jokic is playing and the way the Nuggets are performing, like what is the Mavs fans' take on all of this? So I use this as an opportunity to rewind a little bit, to clarify some misconceptions about what I'm saying, and to just sort of get to the real point. So first off, obviously Jokic is playing at a really high level right now, but his team is not, matching that sort of high level of play, which is something that Mavericks fans are very, very familiar with. You remember last January, Luka Doncic was performing at about as high a level as a player I've seen in a long time.
I mean, I think it's the best statistical season of the modern era.
Yes, and I think that he was punished a lot because of the injuries that sort of surrounded his team. And Mavs fans were trying to, and I don't mean this is like Stephen A. Smith. I'm talking about like really smart people. I argued about it with JJ. He used to make fun of me and was like, dude, he's not the MVP. His team's got to be better. And what I would always argue is that statistics, while they are objective, they are not used objectively.
Yes. And good line.
And so for me, a lot of the arguments of plus minus net rating XYZ, that was all relevant. But I mean, how can you compare one player who is playing on a team with a static starting lineup, the same, the rotations are the same every single night, XYZ, and another player who is playing with a different starting lineup every night, a different lineup variance, a different rotation every single night? Of course, his numbers are going to do this.
Sure.
So ultimately, Luka had the Mavericks at about 500 in the month of December. And that ultimately really did hurt his MVP case and hurt a lot of the conversation discussion around him last year. Now, it was great, a nice little moment for Mavs fans that the box plus minus did not help Jokic get past the Wolves. The style in which Luka played and the way his teammates played, they did that. Now, again, this is the thing that Dallas had been arguing for a long time, with Kyrie out, with Lively out, with no PJ, with no Gafford. with no good teammates, your team's not going to perform as well. It's a shocking revelation, I know. So we thought we'd put that to bed. And then Jokic is sort of doing what he's doing. And instead of seeing the same kind of response that Luka got last year, the response is overwhelmingly, that doesn't matter. He's still number one in our MVP rankings. He just needs help. That I've seen that a lot of that. And it's funny because it's not from a static archetype of NBA media. It's not from a talking head. It's from a combination of talking heads to like Legion Sports to like really smart NBA people. And you just have to sort of ask yourself why. And I think there's a couple reasons. I think one, Luka's really annoying to some people to watch. I think that is a real thing. And how do really smart analytic people actually say that out loud? Who knows? The second thing is that as much as really smart NBA media people want to pretend that, the postseason has no impact on MVP, wrong. It's just a different postseason that has impact, because what Jokic is getting right now is a benefit of the doubt that no other player could ever get unless they had won a ring and were this sort of beloved, whatever. So that's what I think is happening. But the misconception I want to say is that according to my standards, Luka or Jokic should still be in the MVP race. But I've been consistent. I don't think team record should be this end all be all of everything. But according to what the media narrative sort of like establishment has the precedent that it set, is that he actually should be nowhere near that discussion. And the other thing I want to say is I am not arguing for Luka Doncic to be MVP this season. I'm not making that argument. I'm talking about last season. This season is a whole different ball game. He's not even in my top 3 right now, but it's a long season and that could change. So anyways, wanted to get all that off my chest. I hope that makes sense.
No, it absolutely makes sense. And I apologize if you guys hear the occasional noise in the background. So far on this show, we've had both of my children. My wife occasionally sticks her head into frame. My dogs make appearances. So we might have my contractor also appear on the show, at least in audio form, as he works on something in the other room. I apologize for that. So I had, I part of my deal and part of why I do this show is because I specifically like engaging with people. And I try to engage with people in good faith insofar as they will actually do so. There's a fair amount of online discourse that comes down to people basically behaving like professional wrestlers, where they take a position and go with it. And like, that's fun. So it's like every now and again, like I'll search my name and find somebody that like wants to like kill me or, hates all my takes. And it's like, okay, well, like then stop listening to me. But
dude, I just want to say, I completely agree. I'm reading a comment right now from Rolex. Y'all too worried about Luka winning MVP. Let's go get the chip first. You understand that Kirk and I cannot go get the chip.
No, nor can we actually vote on the MVP. So
yeah, what do you want us to say? Like, I hope they win the championship. Hey, good to see you, buddy. I'll see you next time. No, we're talking about Mavericks. Like,
and quite candidly, I was specifically asked by multiple people follow me, like saying, Kirk, I want you to talk about this. This one guy is like NBA and a whole bunch of numbers in his handle, like one of those accounts that like basically comes up as spam unless you click through it, just with the way Twitter works these days.
Yeah.
And he's like, I want you to like, he's like, his opinion is that it is within my job description to make an argument for Luka Doncic's MVP. He's like, if you're a Mavs fan and this is a thing that you do, I think this is an argument you should be making.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with him, but I think it's an interesting point of view to have. And the whole reason I watch sports is for a variety of levels of enjoyment and discussions and things to talk about that aren't world level bleak, because I don't want to constantly be grumpy and sad all the time. I like sports. It's a real wild.
I love arguing about sports too.
Yes, it's fun. And that's why we have this discussion. And really, there's an argument to be made that like we could be having this discussion to explain to people why we don't think it should even matter. And maybe we will. I don't know if we're even going to talk about that. So it's a very meta thing, but I at least want it out there in the universe because, I run a Mavs website. I run a Mavs podcast, and like, I try to approach and take in all points of view, because I think if you shut off if you shut off lots of things, then you end up being dumber, and then you can't really counter actual arguments. So the Luka element of all this, I think, is particularly interesting because right now it feels like so much of where the online portion of the fandom is not frustrated that Luka Doncic is not MVP, because I don't think anybody is really willing to make that argument yet. And I think maybe we'll talk about a little bit later what it would take for Luka to insert himself in the conversation. Yeah. NBA.com put a Kia MVP ladder post out 3 days ago by somebody named Sean Powell, and it places Jokic and Antetokounmpo as 1 and 2 for all the reasons that we were told that Luka can't be number 1.
Yeah.
If you start with that from the basis point, the rest of this stuff fucking sucks. And I don't, and look, MVP voters are human. And the thing that I really don't like is I don't like being lied to. You can, all you have to do as an MVP level voter is look at me and say, I understand where you're coming from, but the bottom line is when there's a small level of distinctions between players, I'm ranking Luka lower because I don't like Luka. That is what a lot of these people are unwilling to say out loud. They're unwilling to say out loud. Man, can't wait for somebody to clip me saying that and just like play it on repeat, just like that 3-second bit.
Yeah.
But that's really the fact of the matter, is it comes down to so many people in the voting class. Let's just call them the 100 MVP voters, of which there's a rotating cast of people that do awards ballots at the NBA. And the NBA publishes them. I kind of think they should go back to being secret, because I think we would get much more interesting ballots.
I completely agree with that.
And if we're doing this for an interesting sake, we need to it needs to be interesting. And like groupthink is not interesting.
It's not interesting. And it's very impactful. And it's also, the reality is that we live in such a different world than when it used to be private. Like the equity that people sort of have on the internet is much, much higher. I would go as far as to say that I had a conversation with an MVP voter last year who told me what his real MVP vote would have been if it was private, but it was public. So he felt he had to vote a different way because he didn't want to be that name that stood out. And I think that's a problem. Like, I think that's a real problem. I think more people do that than we give it credit for. And with the Luka thing, that's what wound up happening, was that conventional wisdom was just like, he can't be that.
Yep.
And again, I want to make it clear that I don't think that, like, I don't feel that passionately that Jokic shouldn't have won or Shea shouldn't.
Agree.
But the reasons for making it to where Luka was not in the conversation was utter bullshit. And it was extremely validating to see that come to fruition in the postseason, where, he sort of rocked every MVP, candidate's socks off.
That's right. And that's, so I'm a clutch player of the year is not what I meant to go for. And so, and here's the thing, guys, this is something that I also think is important here. We tend to, as media consumers, people who are like really in the weeds, tend to assign a level of Luka hate onto specific personalities.
Yeah.
Whether it's Stephen A. Smith, whether it's Tim Bontemps. My favorite is that people who assume that Luka, or that Tim McMahon hates Luka. It's like, no, like he spends all, like, they're combative for a reason. They don't hate each other. But that's neither here nor there. When you have 100 MVP voters, it's people who you've never heard of. That it's like, okay, let's just say, and I'm just pulling out names. I don't know. And I'm not saying this is that particular, but like JJ Redick last year was an MVP voter.
He was.
Julia Poe, Kendrick Perkins, Gary Washburn, Stan Van Gundy. Okay. The list is really long. And what I'm saying, and like hate is really even too strong a word. I bet none of these guys really hate, but it's like there's the human element of disdain that comes in. Like, And I think that makes, like, that's the cringe difference. And the thing about that I want to like emphasize to folks, that's at least important to me, is that Luka has to overcome a lot of this stuff. Okay. Yeah. And I'm going to make a comparison. You as a parent will get this. I have an 8-year-old son who has, and this will shock no one knowing me, has a little bit of a temper problem. Okay. And as I explain to him all the time, I'm like, your temper problem will follow you around unless you get it under control.
Yeah.
There are elements of what Luka does that follow him around. Some of it is unfair. Some of it is quite fair. And Mavericks fans don't like hearing about it, where it's like, I don't think Luka's complaining as much this year.
He's
Yeah,
not. He's not. No.
But you turn on a broadcast and you listen to another team's broadcast, and they're like, he talks to the refs all the time. And I'm sitting here going, does he? I don't think he does anymore.
Well,
and it's like he's made an improvement, but it's not good enough.
Yeah, I still think he talks too much. But he's definitely got it way under control. We did a podcast this morning with Joakim Noah, and he was basically like, it's what's stopping him from being the like undisputed. Like he actually believes that. And I don't disagree, because I think that it really does rub people the wrong way. And it's also like, Kirk, if Jokic has a bad third quarter, which he did that one night. A lot of times people just kind of go like, well, he's got a huge, like I saw Matt Moore say this, he has a huge offensive load, therefore he had a rough quarter. And I can't imagine Luka ever getting that kind of sentiment. And the reason is because there's a very easy, identifiable thing to point to. It's that he spends 2 seconds out of every 24-second offensive possession at some point looking at a referee or making a gesture towards a referee. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
He does do that. And so when you give people that excuse to point to that and say, oh, you did that wrong, then there's like a definable trait or characteristic, a flaw in your game. You know what I mean? And when in reality, basketball is a game of variance, and you're going to have your occasional bad Jokic quarter or bad Luka quarter. That has nothing to do with refs, but we can define it. I want to just back up for 2 seconds on the discourse thing.
Sure.
The thing that drives me crazy, you said you hate being lied to. Mm-hmm. For me, I really dislike when people hide behind analytics. They just hide. And I've found that is a lot of Luka hate, is that they point to a box plus minus something or other as if that is some sort of end all be all bit of information that is going to give you everything you need to know about this player, that you are actually going to overlook an actual box score to say, nah, that doesn't matter. But you know what does matter is this. I find that to be, I'm driven crazy by that. And I want to share with you this interaction I had with this guy named Tyler Ames, because it was amazing. Sure. So I went on my whole bit about Luka and Jokic, whatever. And he responds, yeah, but Luka sucks and is the worst. And I said, and I responded back to this guy and I said, I actually love this argument. At least you're honest about your feelings and not hiding behind box plus minus. And then the guy responds, Luka is clearly an all-time great. Nothing we've ever seen before. And if I were a Mavs fan, I would defend him with my life. Right. But it's really hard to watch if you're not a Mavs fan. And I can empathize with that. And the fun little button to this story is the next day, I'm like at the coffee shop and this guy comes up to me and he goes, hey, I'm that guy. And I was
that's
like,
weird and scary and awesome.
Weird. But you know, like I can appreciate somebody who's like, I hate watching him play. Mm-hmm. I can't argue with that, you know?
So I get this, my phone starts blowing up is a lot, but people don't really text me during the day because we all have jobs. A live listener, Adam Mares of DNVR, texted me during the show and he says, the only phenomenon what does he say? This doesn't make sense. We live in a world where our news is curated by us directly and indirectly. There's no more Luka hate than there is hate for LeBron, Steph, Jokic, etc. You just see more of it because it makes its way to your feed more. I think it's a good point, and I think it's worth talking about. I mean, I had mentioned to you off camera before we even started, and I talked about it a little bit in the first half of the show. I've not really approached this stuff because I'm of the opinion that Luka isn't in the MVP discussion yet, so I'm not interested in talking about it. Yeah. So when I see other people debating about what happens in the double, let's just call it the double standard that Dallas Mavericks fans see, I haven't wanted to wade into that debate.
But why? Because it has nothing to do with his season this year.
I've not wanted to wade into the debate because I think it takes away from the fact that the Mavericks are 16-8. And I suppose you could have this argument of, oh, you can have both things at once. And I never want to tell anybody how to be a fan. But I spent a significant portion of the post-Dirk Nowitzki era, number one, being really pissed, not a title era, so like 2011 being really pissed that the Mavericks fucked every single thing that they did up following the championship until they drafted Luka Doncic. Every single offseason, every single trade deadline was a variation of a shit show as Dirk Nowitzki drowned in 6 inches of bathwater, and we had to be told that it was great, and we as the fan base was wrong. By Mark Cuban, by Donnie Nelson, by the cadre of media people that exist in this market to tell Dallas fans, oh no, you're wrong. Here, Mark Cuban, do another interesting thing where you say something offensive about MVP voters or MVP caliber players. That was the world that I lived in for several years, even because I started writing in 2013.
Yeah.
And it ultimately doesn't matter that I was right, because who cares about being right in a sport? Like, I want my team to win. Yeah. And you know, the post-decision LeBron era has been rife with fans who care way more about being right in a sports argument than their team winning. So I never really gave a shit about this stuff. And I do a little bit like you're really good at getting me going, which is partially why I wanted to have this discussion. Because I maybe I should care more. No. But my group chats are all coming back to the fact of the only thing that matters is the ring. Everything will follow if the ring happens, meaning the Dallas Mavericks NBA championship. So I don't love looking backwards. And there's just this constant inclination of saying, but this wasn't fair. This wasn't fair. To which I have to say, at least to me, I understand, but I don't care.
Yeah, I get it. I think like I'm a little Bill Simmons-y in like the historic nature of basketball. Like I'm like a big, like we ought to do things correctly.
Sure.
Kind of person. And I really do think that's one of the greatest seasons I've ever seen. And
last year,
yeah. And so I'm still, and to get this sort of like validation of the postseason success, everything like that, like I'm still on that. And honestly, you kind of alluded to this earlier. I think in some ways I argue so passionately about this because like the world is crazy. And there's all sorts of stuff we could argue about.
Right. This is
and
more fun.
Everything is channeled through this Luka thing for me. I honestly think that's why, because like, I'm not going to wade into stuff like that, but I know basketball. I know media. I think that there is a disconnect between the two, like big time right now. And it's a weird mixture of like really popular talking heads on television and like people who are sort of birthed from NBA Twitter and have been conditioned to think like their peers. And I think that there is a big gap there of like, are there honest people out there? Like, it's not a coincidence that nobody was really caping for Luka except for maybe Tim Legler. Like, I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that's a product of everybody trying to look smart like they're the next guy. So I don't know. Maybe it is over, but seeing Jokic at the top, not even fall, but actually just be at the top, that I just lost it. Cause I was like, okay, so this is just stupid. You know what I mean? And I get, like I said, I think that advanced stats, I think it's a broader conversation about advanced stats, like really being like deployed in this really weird way. There's a comment here from Bernardo. The thing with box plus minus was that Luka got better on it last year, and he was playing worse at the end of the season.
I mean, box plus minus, like it's a baffling statistic to me. Whatever.
I completely agree. All of these things are most of these things are in some ways estimates. Like if we're really getting to the nitty gritty of it, you could say it's objective, but at the same time, it's taking into a lot of probabilities into account.
That's right.
It's not perfect. It's certainly not perfect. And I feel like, so anyway, so that this whole Jokic thing, it was like I wanted to move forward. You know what I mean? Postseason happened. I'm moving forward. I'm living my life. And all I'm seeing, a 58-point game and a massive loss to the Wizards.
Like the Wizards are one of the worst basketball teams that have ever been assembled. So
and I'm sitting there going, there isn't a single negative comment about Jokic.
See, that's where I think the curation comes in. I'm not sure I agree with you on that.
But Kirk, we're not just. This is what I disagree with you about, because I agree to a certain extent, but you and I don't we follow basketball people.
Yeah.
So I'm not weighing like, Joe Schmo, Jokic,
Sure.
Avatar. I'm talking about credible basketball people that are like, how can any team win like this?
Mm-hmm.
He needs to be knocked down a peg. Like that. These are from the same people. So
Sure.
you could say it's like it's an algorithmic thing, but I think it's actually
that's the goal. That's the goalpost being moved,
standard.
and that's
And no matter what people say about the postseason impacting the MVP vote, it is clearly it does, because if you win a ring, as you said, you get a benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
There is no debate. Can you win this way? Well, Denver won with him, so
right. And that's where your former like one of my favorite pairings discussing basketball is Bill Simmons and Ryan Russillo. Not because I agree with them, just because I like hearing them talk about basketball.
I do too.
And to hear them talk about the Mavericks, it gives me a feeling as a fan that they're not watching and they're lying to me.
But what's crazy is that I would still rather listen to Bill, because Bill is not shy about the fact that he doesn't like watching.
I also think he is actually watching, but it's like, and that's where perception comes into view, because it's like you're bringing your biases to the table and you're watching something and your mind is not meeting you. Like Bill or Ryan Russillo's minds are not going to be changed. They're just not. And that's, I think, what makes a lot of this very frustrating, because, circling back, like, so we've been talking about two different things, sometimes a little bit interchangeably, and that's my fault, because this is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on adult subjects.
Yeah.
We're talking narrative versus actual voting. So narrative is a very different thing than voting, but we do understand that narrative influences voting, particularly because a lot of the voters don't get a chance to see but more than a handful of games. 15 games probably max, I think, in a lot of circumstances. It's hard to watch a lot of NBA. There's a lot of NBA every year. So the narrative of this right now, and we're gonna talk about Luka a little bit more, and what the narrative and the actions on the court need to change for them. But the voting of it all, like, I think that when it comes time, like, I think that Tim, like, and I told Tim Bontemps this, so I don't really have a problem saying it again. Tim Bontemps' poll is a push poll. It influences voting a particular way. It is not a reflection of what the voters feel. It is a reflection of what the audience thinks it is a reflection of what the voters believe the audience wants to see.
Yeah. And I completely agree with that. And I ran into Tim.
He very much disagrees with that. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, but I work in politics. That is not how but like, people lie to pollsters all the time.
Well, he and I, we ran into each other at the finals, and we had talked about his appearance on your show, and I sort of gave him an apology, because whenever I came on that one time and kind of made fun of him, I was a few glasses of wine deep, and I was like, fucking Tim Bontemps. He's actually a really nice guy.
Right, he's a great guy.
I do think he's like thoughtful, but I also think that it's actually like, it's not really like his poll is that, but it kind of goes back to my like thought that it's
the Embiid MVP is the example of this. Let's be clear. Embiid should not have won MVP. Jokic was better. The only reason that happened is because it turned into a narrative-driven poll. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I think you're just right, and I think people, I think like, when people are like, what does Luka have to do? It's actually not, I mean, yeah, there are actions he can do, but like, he kind of needs some stuff to fall into place. I mean, on top of the things that you're probably going to mention, because that is a reality, because because it is such a groupthink industry right now, that you have to hope that the group goes a certain way. You know what I mean? Rather than like again, last year, like, you couldn't have scripted it any. I'm not sure what could Luka have done last year to win MVP? You're muted.
What could Luka have done last year to win MVP?
Nothing. The answer is nothing. It was already written.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my point, is that's the point of the poll. That's the point of the public voting being out there on Twitter. Like, Yeah, I just think it's a narrative thing, and what he has to do in the future to ever win one is obviously play a certain way, probably behave a little differently, and then hope that the cards are in his favor. That is a huge one.
Well, I think we should close the element of the conversation about narrative is that I think broadly speaking, Luka is treated in a way that I feel is unfair, but I will also understand how people reach the conclusions that they do about him. I wish I could convince more people to release their priors and start over fresh.
Yeah.
But I don't do that. So it's a very difficult thing, you know. So I sort of want to at least say I wish things were different.
He says as he gets ready to watch Lou Dort play basketball tomorrow.
God, the war criminal Lou Dort, friggin' modern age Bruce Bowen. See, now you threw me off track.
Sorry.
I think there's merit to this conversation. I don't want to tell people how to fan or feel, because if you enjoy this debate, you should continue doing it. But I would beg people to not let it take away from the team's success, because otherwise you're missing. Like, the Mavs started 16-8. The last time they started anything like this was 2021, and that was the bubble year where the season got blown up. Other than that, the Mavericks haven't had great starts in a long time. The 2011 was an incredible year. 2011 was 13 years ago, before either of us had children. And it's been a long run to, things like this season don't come about very often, at least this kind of start. I just want people, if arguing is fun for you, have fun, but don't let it take away from the fun, is sort of where I think where I am. Okay. And so the last thing, and because I've already kept you longer than I intended to, is let's just say that we both kind of agree that at the moment, Luka is on the outside looking in for MVP.
Yes.
I will say, before this 4-game run started, my opinion was I don't think Luka can make it back into the race. However, we're 24 games into the season. I think that I don't see anybody running away from it, because I think SGA runs into a very similar problem Luka's going to run into, which is his team's so stinking good. Are you sure this guy's the most valuable player? And I think Luka will run into that problem. I think Jokic runs into the problem that we've already described, where it's like, I don't think a team can give it to a sub like a 6 seed or lower again. And the Nuggets are heading south. Who else is like a real MVP candidate? Like Giannis is MVP.
Tatum and Giannis are both considered.
Tatum has to be up there pretty high for, and I hate admitting that. And then there's Giannis, who there's another team that sort of toils in the darkness to a certain extent, and they're an interesting group where I think they're a horrible team that's benefiting from a truly soft schedule, and Giannis is amazing. So laying all that out there, I actually want to revise my previously thought take, and I think there is a path back in for Luka Doncic to the MVP race. I think it's for the Mavericks to hold on to, not just get there and hang out, to hold on to a top 3 seed for the rest of the season.
So I think you're right. I think there's a path to the race. I don't know if there's a path to number 1, and that's the risk of starting the season late. It's just the risk is that SGA and Tatum have both been very consistent on number 1 seeds.
Yep.
And if both of them remain that way, I don't even see how one of the comments, I'm sorry, I don't remember the name, but somebody was like, honestly, if Luka leads the Mavs to win the NBA Cup, it doesn't, no one's going to list that as a reason at the end of the year, but in the moment, it's going to propel him in a way that I'm not sure anything else could.
It's a good point, because it changes the narrative.
It changes the narrative, but could it change, like, in the same way that, like, God, it does certainly feel like MVP just sort of turns into who we wish we would have given it to the year prior. Isn't that kind of funny? Like, and so for that reason, I am a little like, I think people are really itching for SGA to win an MVP. I could just feel it. I also think he's good enough. So, like, it's kind of a combination between, I think the narrative is there, the team's really good. He's clearly the engine of that team. I think if I were the Thunder, I would be like, hey, we have a 3-game head start. Let's sit SGA and lose a game, and then we'll show how valuable he is. Because I actually think he's that valuable. That team. He's like,
but we were more talking. We weren't necessarily saying winning the race. I was more saying,
I know. I'm saying
Luka in the top 5. Let's just say.
I agree. There is definitely a path to his top 5, and I think that path is like soon. But is there a path to him actually winning it? I don't know. I'm like a little more skeptical on that. I think that
I mean, he just so here's the fun part. We didn't lead with this. Did you see he won Player of the Week?
I did.
Luka won Player of the Week. It's Luka and everybody's favorite shooting guard from Miami. Luka shot a hilarious 44% from 3 over 3 games. Like, yeah, you're gonna light the world on fire when you hit 44% from 3.
Yeah. Hey, I used to have I pitched JJ on this idea, and he was like, I love this. And it was that I actually think that Player of the Weeks and Player of the Months should count towards end of season awards.
Oh, like LeBron just like winning it forever and then not winning the MVP.
Back in the day. Like let's say each vote is a single vote, a single point. Like each Player of the Week is a 0.25 point, and then each Player of the Month is a 0.5 point. You know what I mean? Just give us a little more meaning towards it, because I think Luka won a lot of Player of the Weeks and Months last year, and I remember being like, okay, what does that do? You know what I mean?
Windhorst was, and I love the Hoop Collective pod. Windhorst was so hilariously, and I do not believe this was intentional, but he kept talking about stat deflation with Luka, and as he's reading off Luka's stats, he's like, well, he's down to 29 points and 9 rebounds and 8 assists.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you hear the words that are coming out of your mouth right now? That means last year when he was 34, 8, and 8 while shooting 40% from 3, he was actually astounding.
But you don't care about the MVP thing. You've said, or you don't care about you don't care about the double standard of the Jokic thing. And
it frustrates me, but I can't focus on it because I don't love going down those kind of rabbit holes.
But as a person who covers this team, like, take the MVP thing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
It still drives me crazy. The 73-point reaction is one of the craziest things I like saw as a Mavericks fan. Like the way that the media reacted to it, and some folks tried to like justify it and say, well, hey, it was a domino effect, a lot of things that happened prior. And I was like,
are you taking away the 3-point line? Because that's why he scored 73 points. It wasn't because of free throws.
Yeah. And it's like, well, is it, I was told it was a domino effect with this and that, but I was like, yeah, but when I watched the highlight package, it wasn't showing any Embiid or Booker or Damian.
Lucas were the only numbers that didn't go down following the rule change.
Yeah, it was all Luka highlights for what's wrong with the NBA. And so this is why I just go like, I just go like, I don't even know how to put Luka's like career in context right now because of how weird it's been covered. It has been covered super weird. And I think he's like, and like as a fan of his, like I'm just like a little like, no, I think that if you looked at it objectively, what he's done is, somebody tweeted at me today, like Jokic is miles better than Luka. Somebody said that. And I was like, miles? Would you say miles?
I wouldn't say miles, but I do think
maybe he is, but like also it's kind of like on a given night, one could beat the other. Like, I don't think it's like, I think it's kind of like, I think it's pretty darn close. The Jokic thing is, I mean, there's a reason why Jokic said Luka is my MVP last year. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's a reason for that because he saw what he was doing. It was like, that's a monster. That's a monster season.
Yeah. I mean, and really, so you and I covered, you and I were fans of Dirk Nowitzki, who is a player that as we get further away from his career, it will make less and less sense to the people who are like part of highlight culture. And there's nothing wrong with highlight culture. It's just Dirk's game doesn't suit it. But then you look at, like, every few weeks I get some graphic from Basketball Forever where it's like Dirk Nowitzki had the hardest path to a title in the last number of years. And it shows like the sheer number of once and future MVPs that the Mavericks went through in 2011.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think big picture, we know that Dirk Nowitzki is going to be not like relegated. It's not what I mean, but he'll eventually slide out of the top 25 because that's just the way history goes.
Time.
Luka Doncic is a different beast. I have made the argument time and again that Luka Doncic could be Thanos snapped right now, and he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And you get these people that disagree with me, and I'm like, first of all, it's the Basketball Hall of Fame, not the NBA Hall of Fame. Yeah. His pre-NBA career, which so many people are naive of, and I don't know why, there's this really cool tool. It's called the internet. You can go find it. He has been a projected Hall of Famer for anybody with a brain since he was about 16 years old. Mm-hmm. And he is part of why this discussion is so funny. Is like we're talking about a guy who, if he plays long enough, and that's a different, maybe that might not happen. You never know. But if he plays another 10 years, we're looking at a guy that's he's gonna have made like 12 straight all NBA teams, hopefully an MVP. He's already got one scoring title. Like you're just talking about a guy with more accolades than he knows what to do with. He's like like those goofy things, like a general with like the giant, like the endless amounts of medals on his chest. So it's like we're talking about a guy who's all, and I say this in comparison to Dirk, to where he's going to be better than Dirk when this is all said and done.
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's definitely like on track to do it. It's just a matter of like, it's a matter of things like, that soliloquy of yours is why myself and I think other Mavs fans do get worked up over the MVP thing and do get worked up over the Jokic thing, because those accolades they do matter to a player's career and their standing and all of that stuff. And what does it say about basketball media that someone averaging 34, 10, and 9 who has a 6-time first team All NBA or whatever, 5-time first team All NBA player in his first 6 years in the league? Like, what does it say about basketball media that player is not in MVP conversations? Like, he wasn't in the conversation last year. People kind of like, yeah, he's kind of, but he wasn't. It wasn't even a thing. So it was like, what does it say about basketball media to me? It says that there's something flawed about it, because in a season where a guy averages 34, 10, 9, then leads his team to the NBA Finals, and I mean, that's not even in the conversation.
That's where I'm very sympathetic, and I'm sure like it's one of the various people that love clipping my shows is going to like hit me up on this sort of stuff. But this is where I sympathize with people who are absolute Luka psychopaths, because you see the way Wemby is covered.
Yeah. Huh.
Like I love Wemby, and I'm sure he could be an all-generational player, but he's done nothing in his basketball career relative to Luka. Prior to the NBA, he had done nothing relative to Luka, and he is crowned and awarded because Brian Windhorst went out and gave him that crown and proceeds to talk him up to the end of time. Mm. And we talk about how good the Spurs are, and maybe the Spurs will make the play-in. Maybe they'll pull the plug on it. Who knows? Stephon Castle rules. I really like that Spurs team. It's not a denigration of Wemby at all. Yeah. But it's what happened was Luka was pretty good in his rookie year, but I think even he was seeming like his stats weren't great. The Mavericks were awful. Second year, they were so good. Yeah. They went to the bubble. They were amazing, but they lost. And then that next year, that post-bubble year 3, people don't like this. I just wish we could move past it. But year 3 is when the narrative really started to bend, because Luka was not in shape. It took him a while, and he has quite, in my opinion, he's quite literally never recovered narratively from that start to the 3rd season of his career.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's been the same talking points, whether he's in shape or not, and whether that's fair or not. I'm just saying that's the way this has gone. And so the fact that they started year 7 the same way, well, that's not fair. That's a lie. Let me back that up. Like what's the guy who does those great videos where he's like, back it up, on Instagram, can't remember, his Jordan the Stallion. He's one of my favorite Instagram followers. This year, Luka's first 5 games or so were well below his shooting standards.
Yeah.
Then he got a little better, actually got a lot better. Then they rested him for a game. He had an injury, something, played 1 game, missed 6 games, then has since come back. So we're not looking at much of a season, but it's like Luka, I don't know. The optimist in me wants to say Luka's about to skyrocket to the moon with his play, and like the Mavericks will be carried right along with him.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, I think that his there's just nothing like there's very few, the Wemby thing. I'm saying a lot. Let me just pause for 2 seconds. I went on Down the Dunk and we talked about something very similar, because I said one of the biggest problems with the NBA right now is that it actually doesn't focus on the reality today. It's always like kind of pushing a narrative that's in the future that doesn't act that
well, I mean, the Anthony Edwards is the best example of that. Like, I love Ant, but they put that man before the court. They put that cart before the horse and shoved. And
well, and if you feel that way about Ant, how can you, like, Wemby's maybe even worse in some ways. And so, in like, what my whole point was that I actually think it's like a pretty big miss to not have the Thunder on Christmas Day. Like, I was just kind of like, why would you not? They're clearly going to be a really relevant team for the next 10 years. They're the best team in the West right now. They're the most likely team to go to the finals. And I think it's going to be them in Dallas in the Western Conference Finals. And then I legitimately don't understand. And it's because they really, really want Wemby and Anthony Edwards to be the next faces of the NBA. Well, guess what the worst thing for Wemby is going to be?
Tell me.
When he goes and plays the Knicks and puts up like 18 points, which he's done. He did it on opening night, like there's still this sort of like, this need to push something that isn't a reality. And I kind of think that there is a little bit of that with Luka, where it's like, I mean, you can sit there and say that like Anthony Edwards and Luka are like, they're not even in the same stratosphere.
No,
and Luka is more in the Jokic stratosphere, and it's a fact. Anyways, so I don't know.
We can keep talking. I mean, I think this has been hopefully a productive conversation. I'm sure I'm going to get clipped to death, and I'm sure I'm going to get yelled at by this, because the best part, and you know this from the kind of shows you do, the media work you do, you think you know what's going to hit in terms of posting something.
Sure.
And then it's like, oh, well, that just did fine. And then something you would have never considered in all the world, like just does amazing. And like our recap pods are far and away the most listened to thing that we do.
Yeah.
The after parties and that sort of stuff, people like so funny. People hate those or they love them. Like our my former editor's husband, his name's John Gennaro. He's a Mavs fan, big time Mavs fan. He was like, I can't listen to these. How do you do those? I'm like, because I like talking to people. So it's like the one thing if somebody would take something away from this, and I would just summarize it like this, is first, narratives, enjoy them insofar as just be sure that you're having fun with this. Don't fight the good fight. No one ever really sees the tweets. Luka Doncic is one of the best players of all time. We think Luka Doncic could make his way back into the discussion. And maybe if he does, we'll be looking back on this pod and saying, all right, look at what he did from game 25 to game 82. And okay, is that better than what player X did from game 0 to game 82? And well, those are the fun kind of sports discussions that we like to have. This should be a good time.
I also just really want to interject that because there's some Nuggets fans in here and on Twitter, and it's like, this was not really intended on my part to hate on Jokic.
Never. No.
In fact, something that all I'm saying is that, like, I know what it's like to watch an unbelievable performance and then watch the pieces around them come short.
Yep.
And that sucks. I think it was really just a comment on the way it's sort of discussed. I've said it a million times. I don't think Team Record should play the kind of impact that it has on the MVP lately. I don't think it should have that kind of impact. And I think that Jokic probably should very much still be in the race. But if I'm going by the standards laid by the media over the last few years, then Jokic shouldn't be in it. But I just can't, I have to clarify that over and over and over again. Jokic is unbelievable. He's the best player in the NBA. Like, I believe that. So just like that it's just a media thing. Calm down. And
That's
also
right.
to William, who's your favorite movie in the Oscar race? Right here, buddy.
Ooh. Just trying to really having film Twitter come after you is the last say. Like, you think best, like y'all think sports Twitter's weird.
Dude,
Film Twitter, film people are super crazy.
They are. But you know what? When there's a family-friendly movie that's not a slog to get through, I'm like, let's go. Like,
for me, I would have to say Wild Robot.
Hey, no argument here, buddy. No argument
that movie.
here.
My wife is a hard ass. Okay, she's not an emotional person. That movie destroyed her, and I was like, "Ha, told you."
It's a great movie. It'll mess you up. Shout out Maren Morris. Great.
Oh man. Okay. Well, you pop on shows from time to time. I took up an hour of your life. I apologize. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Of course. Thanks to all the comments, engaging. Just have fun with sports. Let's.
I didn't even notice the replies to the video post I'm put out. Nuggets fans are mad online at me. Good stuff.
Sure are.
All right, team. This has been Kirk Henderson and Jason Gallagher. I'm with Pod Maverick. Jason is going to run the entire media one day from behind the scenes. Everybody be good. We will see you guys after the Oklahoma City Thunder game. Are you going to that game by chance?
Tomorrow? Yeah. I'll be there. I'm sitting with my OKC friend. It's going to be a time. I can't wait.
What a great. I hope PJ plays. All right, go Mavs. Everybody be good.
Is he not going to play?
He is questionable with an illness because the Mavericks have had plague cycling through the team. They won't tell us what it is. Like, I'm a shit, and you'll appreciate this movie reference. I posted the GIF or the clip from A League of Their Own where Jimmy Dugan signs all the balls for the kids, and the kid goes, "Avoid the clap, Jimmy Dugan." Wow! With every time Najee's on the injury report. And it's such an old person reference, but I just like, what did they? Because they've been sick since Miami. It's been like 5 games. Like, what is going on? All right.
Just like, no one hang out with anyone's kids.
Right. That's the
let's not.
That's the Luka brought it. That's the take. His 1-year-old got everybody sick. And if you guys think I'm kidding about that, man, when little kids get disease, spreads to adults, and then adults who haven't been around little kids. Of course, it wasn't. That's not what I mean, guys. It's just that's a fun conspiracy theory. They're on the road because the Mavericks have got a crazy road schedule.
Jokic would have known better.
Sure. We're gonna get in so much trouble for this.
All right, see ya.
Be good. Go Mavs.
Bye.